Hi, everyone. Today, let's talk about Goldman Sachs earnings, and then we'll go right into the charts, and then we'll take a look at my positions going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open and Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Goldman Sachs earnings, they blew it. They just slightly beat on revenue, but rising costs really cut into their earnings, reporting $3.32 versus the $5.58 estimated. That is a big disappointment on earnings, and based on that, the stock fell more than 6% in early trading. They go over that in a little bit more detail. You can see quarterly profits plunged 66% from a year earlier to $1.33 billion, or $3.32 per share, which was 39% below estimates. Not good at all. Revenue held up okay, down only 16%, but once again, 16% down is not great. They say they're going to cut costs and they're going to do layoffs, just like a lot of other companies are talking about. So this is not good, definitely not what you want to see, and it is kind of expected. I was honestly a little bit surprised that the early bank earnings were so good, and I expected them to be a little bit more in line with this. So wages are going up, costs are going up, earnings are going down. And if this becomes a little bit of a trend here in earnings, the markets are definitely going to start to pick that up, and they're going to start to turn down as we see earnings move down. I talked about this in my last video. Earnings are the third step in an economic downturn. Profits start to go down, and then we start to see that unemployment rate go higher. We've already heard lots of companies saying that they're going to start cutting jobs, tens of thousands of jobs, and yet another one here with Goldman Sachs. So it definitely seems like we're moving in that direction. Profits moving down, and the potential to see unemployment start to go higher. Continuing on here, they do go into a little bit more detail on the job cuts here. You can see 3,200 employees were cut last week, saving the company about $475 million on an annual expense basis. They still have 48,500 employees, which is about 1.2% lower than the previous quarter. So they're starting to cut more and more jobs in an attempt to start saving some cost. It is worth noting, and we talked about this last week, JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America did top earnings estimates and did quite well. Wells Fargo and Citigroup had more mixed results. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&P 500, you can see we threw a big wick through that upper resistance line, got all the way up to a little bit over $400 on the SPY, got very quick rejection, and then went kind of sideways and sold off into the end of the day. Here's what that looks like on the daily chart, just a very small red bar here. We did not get the decrease in momentum like I thought we might on the daily chart, but RSI did tick down, which is expected when you get a bearish day. I would expect tomorrow that we'll see that down move in momentum. It is worth noting here, jumping over to the 4-hour chart. On the left chart, we did get into negative territory here. We did get the cross on the midday and then into the close. So we are negative on momentum. Big indicator that we're going to start moving lower on the 4-hour. So definitely keep an eye on that. Looking at RSI on the 1-hour, you can see it continues to tick down here on the SPY. Obviously, the banks are going to weigh a little bit heavier on the S&P 500 versus the NASDAQ. So let's move over to that and look at it. Moving over to the NASDAQ, you can see on the hourly, it looks like we're starting to fall out of this structure. We did hit resistance multiple times, could not get through it. Tested it early in the session on the hourly. No momentum here on the hourly either. Was interesting though, on the 12 o'clock candle, we did actually get a higher RSI read at 65.97. Which was a little bit higher than the RSI read that we got yesterday. So slightly higher RSI on the hourly, which is what you would want to see if this is going to continue to the upside. Daily chart ticking up even more than the S&Ps. Like I mentioned, the banks are not going to weigh on the NASDAQ the way they do on the Dow or the S&Ps. But then here into the end of the day, it did look pretty weak. We touched resistance once again, sold off, and then went sideways, and then sold off a little bit more after hours. Jumping to that 4-hour chart, you can see we could not get above resistance. We did get a tick down on RSI here on the 4-hour, so that was sitting at 76.33, whereas the high of day yesterday was 68.29. Slightly higher prices here, but slightly lower RSI read, so continuing with that divergence. We did not get the crossover on RSI here. On the 4-hour, you would expect that to happen tomorrow. We do get negative momentum on the daily chart on the S&Ps, and the 4-hour starts to cross over. That should be the start that gives us the bigger down move. And it looks like this 2350 level that we had going in might be the upper limit. Certainly could see this pop. We got above one resistance line already, but still continues to fail at that 281.75 level. Moving over to the Russell here, we gapped down, filled the gap, and then went sideways throughout the session. Not a lot of movement. RSI continued to tick down throughout the session. You can see on the hourly chart, negative momentum despite sideways price action. So interesting there. Definitely seems like we're foreshadowing some downward price action. Similarly, on the momentum over the last day, got big steps down on the 4-hour. RSI is ticking lower as well. Everything here is indicating that we're going to get that reversal here pretty soon. In terms of resistance, looks like the 187 level is going to be the top. Certainly could get a couple wicks above that. And I do have stronger resistance up here at 188.50, 188.75 in that zone. But right now, 187 seems to be holding. Moving over here to Apple and Tesla on the hourly charts. Apple breaking out to the upside and seems to be holding. A little bit interesting here. Has not broken back below that line that we drew from the tops going back to 3 January, 9 January, and then once again here on 12 January. So that trend line starting to act as a little bit of support if we don't get below that early in the session tomorrow. That would be a little bit concerning. Obviously, I'm bearish, and I've been saying that for a while here. It is worth noting that momentum on the hourly is ticking down. RSI ticked down here today. But we did get a new high on RSI on the hourly. It did get into overbought conditions, so certainly could see that retracement. Let's take a look at that on the 4-hour chart. Not overbought yet, continuing to make higher RSI reads. I know we talked about this before, but it could get up to this 138, maybe even touch the 4-hour 200 moving average, which is currently at 139.37. That'd be about another $3 or $4 of upside potential, whether it hits either of these moving averages in this zone. Already attempted to touch it just briefly here today, so keep an eye on that. Does seem to be breaking out slightly, but I would guess that this will be met with sellers here in the short term, and then we'll get that bigger push down following that. Moving over to Tesla, Tesla seems to be doing its own thing. Had a big push today, even though it was not participating in the rally early on, so it got the breakout, left a gap behind, and then continued higher, and that really propped up the NASDAQ in my opinion. Tesla, one of the big players in the ETF, did get into overbought conditions here on the hourly. Be interesting to see if we set up a divergence here with how high of an RSI read that we got there. But looking at the 4-hour, it does have a lot of room to run compared to Apple. Moving over to IYT on the hour and the 4-hour, continues to tick lower here today. So we did not participate in the rally on Friday. Went sideways at the open, filled the gap up to the Thursday high on a wick, and then sold off really strongly from there. Then basically went sideways. Momentum still ticking to the downside here. RSI still lower here today from the previous day. Same thing on the 4-hour. Looks like we're going to get into negative momentum, get the cross on the 4-hour tomorrow, it looks like. So that should give us some lower prices. And IYT always tends to be one of those leading indicators, which is part of why I was bearish going into the week based on the lower price action that we saw on Friday. And if this breaks down tomorrow and we see markets either holding steady or going higher, that's going to be a pretty big indicator that this rally is not going to last much longer, along with all of the other indicators that we already have. Moving over to semiconductors here on the hour and the 4-hour. Pretty strong day once again, continuing to make new highs along with the NASDAQ. Momentum is ticking down once again. On the hour, we are negative. Not as negative on the 4-hour. We're definitely not going to get that cross here for a little bit. But we are at resistance. We have the 229 and the 226 levels that we were watching going into this. 229 seems like it's going to be holding. We got pretty close to testing that early in the session here today and got a pretty quick rejection here on the 4-hour, followed by a doji. So definitely some indecision, even price action. Seems like we could be moving lower here based on that resistance. But of course, you want to see this momentum rolling into negative territory. RSI sitting at 69.66 here today, based on 69.58, going back to the previous high. So slightly higher RSI read, plus slightly higher price action. So this rally is not showing that we're going to sell off quite yet. On the 4-hour, we do have divergence on the hourly chart, but you would obviously like to see divergence on both charts if you're going to short this. Semiconductors seem to be a little bit stronger here than they have been recently, so keep an eye on that. It is also propping up the NASDAQ here a little bit as well, in my opinion. We do have big gaps left here from about 211 all the way up to 215. So one way or another, this is likely to fail, in my opinion, and then we get a gap fill at least back down to that 211 area. Moving over to the US2-year yield, we did break out like I thought that we might, but it didn't last as long as I thought that it would. So we broke out, kind of faded here last night into the morning, and then faded throughout the session, and then moved down throughout the session, retested support here. So it's good to see those wicks. Hopefully we get this nice little upturn here tomorrow that would move stocks down. Like I said, I am bearish and I do want the markets to move down here a little bit in the short term. But it is worth noting here on the 4-hour that this is an overall downtrend slightly. There's certainly some support here. You can see all of these bottoms that we had throughout December. And then once again here at the beginning of January, it seems like we're testing that level here once again here today. Moving over to the 10-year yield, this did exactly what I thought that it would. Broke out, went pretty high, almost tested the 200 on the hourly chart, came down, tested support, rallied off of support, so that was good. You would like to see this continue to break out if stocks are going to move down. We were in this more deliberate downtrend here on the US 10-year. This is a pretty clear breakout, back test, and continuation, in my opinion. Looks quite strong, and hopefully that continues as long as here in the short term, giving us that down move that I'm looking for. Moving over to the dollar, similar story to the US 10-year and 2-year. Broke out of this down channel that we were in, went sideways, retested support, held, and continued higher up to resistance. Looking for that breakout here tomorrow. Moving up to probably this 103 level would be a good price target. If we do get that breakout, that should be bad for equities. We should start to see that bigger sell-off that I've been looking for over the next couple days. Moving over to J&K on the hourly chart. Similarly, it looks like we broke down here, got out of this support zone, left a tiny gap, it looks like, maybe, but definitely looks like we're going to be rolling over here. Let's jump over to the 4-hour. Similar story here, out of support, coming down to that 9 EMA. If we push through that, then we're going to have significant downside potential all the way down to 92.62. About another dollar of downside. Looks like we're getting back below the overbought condition here on the 4-hour. Still got a little ways to go before we get back into negative territory on the MACD. It looks like maybe a couple days, but definitely not moving higher like the NASDAQ is, which is a leading indicator that we should be moving down here within the next couple of days, if not early next week. Moving over to TLT, pretty choppy session. We did get this rally throughout last week here. Came up, kind of got a double top from Thursday into Friday. Gap down here today, filled the gap, and then sold off throughout the session. Would look to me like we're going to get a break through this, maybe come back and retest the 144 EMA and the 200 SMA, which are at the same exact spot right now. Pretty unusual for that to happen, but that's where we are. And as these turn up here, that should give us a little bit more bullish price action. But you do have to come back and get that retest based on the down move that we've had here recently. You can see RSI continues to tick to the downside on the hourly, and we are below that 50 at this point. So you would expect this down move to continue, at least here in the short term. Finishing up here today with the VIX, you can see here on the hourly chart, we talked about a potential gap up. We had rising RSI with lower lows here. So we got the big gap up, faded a little bit here into the mid-session, and it looks like we might be ticking up here at the end of the session. Here's what that looked like on the 4-hour. Got into positive territory, got the cross here today. Couldn't get above the 50 line on the 4-hour, but we did on the hourly. You would like to see this continue to tick up higher here if we're going to sell off in equities. But this is a good move higher to start. Big gap up like we showed. Big gap up, tested resistance, found some support, and hopefully we continue higher here into tomorrow's session. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I ended up rolling these covered calls. I didn't really want to do that, but we did make a green day, and the NASDAQ continues to go higher here, so we'll continue to go with it. Probably 1, maybe 2 more days of that. So we have 300 shares worth of covered calls, and then I did come down to 2 naked calls on my individual account. Did roll those out as well and up slightly here. Did take a little bit of profits there too, so only $1.58 credit, so break even sitting at $282.50. And then on the day, it says 338 profits, but that's not really true. My actual profits were about $224, basically on par with the NASDAQ there today, about 0.25%, which is very similar to what the NASDAQ did. Moving over to my deltas, you can see I'm slightly less bearish here. I did roll these calls, decent credits on those, so if we get a down move, I'm pretty well protected. And then I am starting to look for some potential short shares depending on what we see over the next day or two. Let me know down in the comments section if there's any charts that you would like me to go over and where you think the market is going to go over the next week or 2 weeks. Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I make this video every single day that the markets are open and Sundays, so make sure you hit that bell. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.